Hello and welcome to another literacy lesson with Mr. D. We're looking at descriptive writing, aren't we? And we are pretending to be Vikings, and we're on a voyage. Word of the day is going to be voyage. That's the word I want you to do your word study on. Because the Vikings, originally from Scandinavia, wanted to travel to different worlds. They wanted to go Viking, a bit of pirates. Wanted to travel to different worlds and see different things and ultimately raid places and bring back all the treasures. So you can think of a Viking a bit like a pirate, but from Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark or Sweden. And on this voyage, you can imagine that some days it might have been nice calm waters for their boat and a lovely sail, but other days I bet there were some pretty nasty storms. And that's what I want us to think about. Can we imagine ourselves being a Viking on this long boat and caught up in the most ferocious storm imaginable? Now, the Vikings were from a long, long time ago, 700, 800 AD. So they didn't have the scientific knowledge that we had. So they couldn't predict storms as well. And they didn't really know why the seas and the weather would turn and do the things that it did. So one of the things that they thought the lightning was from Thor, the thunder and the lightning, that was from the god of Thor. They thought the gods had something to do with the weather. And obviously if it was a stormy day, then you had done something to upset the gods. And maybe the waves were caused by serpents and the lightning was caused by Thor's hammer and anvil banging together. And you would have to do something to make the gods happy again, maybe pray, in order for the storm to stop. So storm writing, especially if we were a Viking, is really, really good because there's so many different things that we can talk about, not only the storm itself, but how it makes us feel and the things that we can see. And it's going to be a great story setting to talk about this storm. So imagine you've gone on a Viking raid, you're in the longboat, you got stuck in one of these horrible storms where the waves are 10 foot tall and the sea looks like, the waves look like a serpent monster tipping the boat like a ragdoll. And in the dark, gloomy sky, lashes of lightning fall down on the ocean waves. Sound like a plan? Let's crack on then. So your word study could start off on that word voyage, couldn't you? Funny little word. What does voyage mean? And you can just split it into 4. That's fine, and you can do your definition here. You could do some synonyms and antonyms, so words that mean the same or words that mean something different. You can do a sentence over here, and then maybe a little picture to remind yourself what a voyage is. You didn't really get time to do this last lesson. If you've done it, great. But I've kind of bypassed it, so you can have another little morning start with this, a chili challenge. Start with the word apple, and you've got to make a word with the last letter of the first word. So for example, apple, the last letter is E, so I've got to think of a word that begins with E. If you want a really hard one, you can make it difficult for yourself by choosing the first 3 letters or 2 letters. Another good one to do is think of some words that start with A and end in N, and the letters in between that word, or the letters in between, are the points you get. So opponent would give you 9 points. What words can you put in here? So obviously if you put a E and make 10, you get 1 point. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can. Tendon, the bits of fibre that hold your muscles together. Tendon. And the darkness came along. The storm was coming. Dum dum dum. We need to think about how we're going to write some really epic sentences for our storm. So I thought today we could look at some good ones, one that I've done and one that I've seen on the internet, and we'll have a go at some expanded noun sentences today. Because hopefully you guys have got a nice picture of a storm, because you need to visualize it. You can't just write something, especially when it's fiction and you've got to use your imagination. You have to have something that you're thinking in your head to be able to write about it. Yeah, so go and picture this horrible storm, draw a picture of it. Yeah, because if you've got that clear picture in your mind, it's going to be so much more easy to write about it. And then you should have also thought of a word bank of different things that we could describe. So here's mine. Here's that stormy picture. And these are the nouns that you could have probably described in your storm. You've got the clouds. What were the clouds like? Were they thick, grey? Dense is another word for thick. It's really, really solid. Threatening. Ominous, that's a great word. Now, when they start looking a bit scary and a bit spooky, you can tell by looking at the sky, don't you? They look ominous. The ominous clouds slowly crept in from what was once a bright blue sky. Threatening the sea with a torrent of rain. You could go on to talk about your rain. How could we describe the rain? Could it just be droplets? What started as droplets turned into a drizzle, which led to a smattering of thick golf balls of liquid. Lashing of rain, they went coming down really hard. When it doesn't look like droplets, it looks like solid bits of lines. That's what we mean when we say lashing of rain. Is it cold rain, icy sheets slashed against the face? Pelting rain, drenching, torrential. What was the wind like? The bitter wind, it really makes you cold. The gusts of wind blew the sail, pulling the boat across the ocean waves. How would you describe the thunder? It rippled, it rolled. Maybe add some of these to your word bank if you haven't got any or you like them. The enormous ocean waves look like claws. Grabbing the boat, pulling it over, capsizing the boat with the claw-like waves. Churn, so if it's going all over the place, it's a bit churning. Imagine that when you're whisking up an omelette with some egg, or you're whisking the water and it goes all wavy like that. That's a churning motion. The lightning, flash, jagged forks of lightning. We talk about those bright lights being forks. Don't know why I'm looking outside as if there's going to be some lightning. There's definitely not going to be any lightning today. The boat swayed, creaked, capsized, was tossed like a toy. That's a good one. So we need to think about looking at our nouns. These are the bits that we've highlighted. There are things, and our adjectives and verbs, and seeing if we can write some expanded noun phrases. I think I've lost my camera. Bear with me. think I'm back. If you lost me, I'm sure you can see my screen. We're looking at my word bank. And we're thinking of how we can turn these words into sentences using what we call expanded noun phrases. So let's have a look and remind ourselves of what an expanded noun phrase is. So there we have a house, a simple statement. Maybe it's a spooky house. Or a derelict. Derelict is a word, it's empty. The derelict house stood on top of a lonely hill. And adding that extra information, that's called an expanded noun phrase. So it just gives a much more detail about the noun that you're describing. It expands. If you're expanding, it makes it bigger. The noun is your thing. And you usually expand it using lots of things like adjectives and prepositional phrases. So first of all, you're going to have your noun. In this case, it's a teacher. You could modify it, give it a little bit more information. A maths teacher, a primary school teacher. Then you can add your adjectives. The helpful, friendly maths teacher. We usually sometimes like to pair up adjectives together to make sure that description is really vivid, it's really clear. We don't always do that. Don't do this for every sentence that you write, add two adjectives, but occasionally we like to add two adjectives to make our explanation, our description really, really clear. And that prepositional phrase is just an extra bit of detail. The helpful, friendly maths teacher with a fluffy mustache. BB. The house, a house. So house is your noun, that's your thing, and a is called a determiner. That's how we describe the house. It's the little word that goes before the noun. So modify it, what the extra information, a country house, a townhouse, a city house. A derelict, that word again, that means it's empty. A derelict old country house with boarded and broken up windows. Again, you've got your windows and you've added two more adjectives there. You haven't just put with windows, a derelict old country house with windows. What are the windows like? We're going to go back to that storm, aren't we? How are we going to describe the clouds? The something something clouds. Two trees. Again, the determiner here is not a tree because we don't want one, we're talking about two trees, so two pine trees, two towering spindly pine trees in the middle of the lake. A ship or a Viking ship. An enormous, menacing Viking ship. Come a bit too far. Set sail on the calm ocean. Now we know that our ocean isn't going to be calm. So can you think of a expanded noun phrase for these? Have a little bit of practice ones. So the loud golden bell hung above the church door. You can add things if you want to. What's there? The loud, annoying bell above the door. Wooden picnic table. The friendly couple. we're eating a delicious picnic on the old wooden table. Delicious picnic on the wooden table. The large, impressive bus. Now we could change this to our own writing. We could talk, instead of a bus, we talk about a long boat or ship. The large wooden ship sailed across the ocean waves in a torrent of rain. Get the idea? Let's have a go here. I'll spin here. It's going to come with a noun. You can think of a way of expanding it. A switch. Bit of a tricky one to start off with. The doctor. The heart doctor stood patiently, hands as still as a statue, waiting to make the final incision. Good, we'll move on. Again, another little game that you can play if you've got a partner or if you've got somebody at home that you might want to play. If they know if they're older and they know what expanded noun phrases are as well. You can play it across Zoom if you want to. You need a dice. You can get a dice on the internet as well if you type into Google. And you need to roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, and then you need to roll the numbers to make your own expanded noun phrase. So you have to start with number 1. To think of your noun. So once you've got a noun, then you can think about adding the determiner, an adjective, a modified noun. Let's have a look at some examples, and then you guys can go back to your word bank and see if you can write some of your own sentences. So here we go. So it's not an ocean storm, my one. It's a little bit of a different storm, about just a generic storm. I've got dark purple clouds sprawl across the sky, billowing in from the west. The trees etch different shades of brilliant green against their ever darkening branches. The suffocating, humid air grows heavy. The scent of rain fills my nose, and the feeling of dread and fear. I'm moving editing as I go along. Take over. Suddenly, the birds fall silent. A stillness descends. For a moment, everything stops. Even the wind holds its breath until a jagged, startling streak of silver splits the indigo sky. A deep rumble of thunder growls in the distance like an angry lion, announcing its presence. Increasing in intensity, it echoes round the hills, travelling across fields and villages, rattling the rooftops. Heavy drops of rain begin to splatter, smash modically onto the parched ground until suddenly the heavens open and a deluge is unleashed. So remember that when we're doing any writing, don't be disheartened if you think, I can never ever write anything like that. We can just copy bits, can't we? We can take things that we like and we can adapt them into our own writing. We use our own ideas and other people's ideas together to make things twice as better. So don't think you have to come up with something like that. We're going to work together. We're going to produce something similar. So a couple of things that I can pick out here. I've talked about my clouds, and how I describe my clouds are dark purple clouds. Sprawl across the sky, and I could maybe add some more description there to the sky. What's the sky like? And the clouds are billowing from the west. So we usually describe smoke as billowing when it's popping up out of a fire. That's what we usually describe billowing at. But the clouds, when they're rolling and the darkness is descending, it probably looks a bit like they're billowing. The humid air. So not just the air, but you might talk about the air getting humid. That means it gets hot and stuffy, and you can tell that rain is about to happen. I like here that I've used a mix of short sentences. Suddenly the birds fell silent. A stillness descends. That creates suspense in your storm. You're going to need lots of suspense when you're thinking about your storm. The deep rumble of thunder growls in the distance like an angry lion. Some similes there. We'll look at similes later, probably tomorrow. Let's see if I got my other one up as well that I found from Pobble. And you can use Pobble if you want to. If you type Pobble 365 and go to Volcano, you can have a look at this as well. This is a good site to use if you want to do something different than my lessons. And it gives you a little story starter and then some questions for you to do. It was the moment they had all been dreading for decades. The volcano had finally erupted. The earth shook as torrents of gold and death, torrents of rain. We're stealing the words. Clouds of ash swarmed over the countryside, enveloping everything in their path. Chaos reigned, so that's reigned as in leading something. So the chaos took over as the beast that had been sleeping for years was now awoken in its fury. But just something to get you in a bit of a writing mood. We're going to go back to our word bank. We're going to think of some expanded noun phrases that we could use for our storm. So let's have a look at our word bank. You can use mine, or you can use yours, or use a bit of both. And we're going to think about the clouds. I'm not just going to say there were clouds. What are the clouds like? The thick, black, clouds. Let's have a practice of using the words together and creating sentences. That's an expanded noun phrase. You can add a prepositional phrase if you feel like it, but it is a bit tricky for now. Need to have a comma between my adjectives. The thick, black clouds. Then you can think about adding extra information. What were the clouds doing? What were the clouds like? The thick, black clouds, we said, billowed across, didn't we? The ever darkening the sky. The thick black clouds billowed across the ever darkening sky. So your prepositional phrase is across the ever darkening sky. So what were the thick black clouds, what were they doing? They were billowing across the ever darkening sky. Ominous cloud. So you don't need to start with a determiner. You could just start with your description. Ominous clouds. That ominous word means if they're looking a bit scary, something's about to happen with these clouds. They're a bit suspicious. Ominous clouds. Fill the sky. Leave that one there. I like that one just as it is. See if you can write a few sentences for clouds. What about the ocean waves? What can we think? Let's have a look at the word bank then. Let's picture what the waves are doing. Enormous. Enormous waves crashed against the boat, or crashed against the long ship. Terrifying, or the terrifying, or terrifying. Terrifying. The terrifying, enormous, or the enormous violent waves. The terrifying, just the terrifying waves battered the old longboat, or battered a damaged longboat. The terrifying waves, or terrifying ocean waves. You've got that modified now. Battered the ship. If you find yourself using things like or as, you're using similes, and that's also good as well. The loud booms of thunder echoed or bounced or echoed across the whole ocean horizon. The loud echoes or the loud booms, or the loud booms of thunder. Echoed some miles around. This word reverberated, that's when they keep bouncing off, reverberated off the 10-foot waves. You can try and add in you can add in multiple nouns together. Flashes of lightning ripped across a darkening sky. Use my examples, use a few of your own. Use your word bank, use my word bank. Try and come up with some sentences. They don't have to be in paragraphs yet. Just think of the clouds. Think of all those words that you've described the clouds with, and try and put those together in a sentence. Try and maybe modify the noun with some adjectives. The dark clouds. The icy rain. The torrential rain. Then think if you can add that prepositional phrase after to add in even more information. The torrential rain smattered. The torrential rain battered the boat with its icy sheets. Or lashings of rain fell down. I want you guys to have a go. Just write a few sentences. They don't have to be in any order. Just try and get your creative juices flowing. We're going to look at some adverbial phrases tomorrow to try and link our sentences together. And then you guys can have a draft at putting all of your ideas together and create this diary entry of a storm, this description of a storm. So off you guys have a go, trying to put your word bank together in a few sentences. If you need any help,